So, in 2026, a war kicks off that completely redraws the map of the Middle East and, well, sends massive shockwaves through the entire global economy. Let's break down exactly what happened.
It all comes down to one single day, February 28th, 2026. A day that started with, believe it or not, diplomatic talks, and ended with the whole world teetering on the edge of a much, much bigger war.
And what went down was just explosive. You've got coordinated U.S. and Israeli airstrikes hitting targets all across Iran. But the real stunner? The assassination of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Iran's response was, as you can imagine, immediate and absolutely furious. We're talking missile and drone strikes hitting Israel, U.S. bases, you name it. And then they made a move that put a chokehold on the global economy. They shut down the Strait of Hormuz. So you have to ask, how on earth did we get here?
Right, so the U.S. and Israel, they had a name for this whole thing, Operation Epic Fury. And that name tells you everything you need to know about their goal here. This was meant to be a swift, decisive campaign aimed at basically cutting the head off of Iran's leadership and wrecking its military capabilities, especially their nuclear sites and missile programs.
But here's what's so wild about the timing. The attack wasn't launched because talks broke down. It was launched while American and Iranian negotiators were still at the table, actively talking about Iran's nuclear program. A move like that pretty much guaranteed things were going to escalate, and fast.
To really get the logic behind Operation Epic Fury, we've got to rewind a bit. This explosion of open war in 2026, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It was really the last stop on a long and increasingly violent road.
Let's just walk through it. In 2024, a huge line was crossed when Iran and Israel started hitting each other directly with missiles, a first. A year later, you have the 12-day war, which ends with the U.S. actually bombing Iranian nuclear facilities. Then, fast forward to just a month before the main conflict, Iran brutally cracks down on massive protests at home. This got a ton of international condemnation, and its enemies saw it as a sign the regime was unstable. And in response to all this, the U.S. starts its biggest military buildup in the region since the Iraq War. The stage was pretty much set.
Okay, so let's get back to the immediate aftermath of those first strikes and see how this thing just spiraled out of control in only 1 week.
Right away, you could see how different the two sides' strategies were. On one hand, you have the U.S. and Israel trying to conduct these, surgical strikes against the core of the regime's power. On the other hand, Iran just lashed out everywhere, not just at Israel, but at anyone they saw as an American ally. It basically set the entire Middle East on fire. And that fire spread fast. This quote from the head of the International Energy Agency, it just perfectly captures the moment this regional war became a full-blown global crisis. It wasn't just about missiles anymore, it was about the energy that literally powers our world.
Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz. That became the exact point where this military conflict slammed head-on into the global economy, and suddenly everybody on the planet started to feel the impact.
And here's why. 20%, a staggering 20% of the entire world's oil supply normally flows right through that strait. So when Iran shut it down, they might as well have turned off a vital tap for the global economy. The result was, well, immediate and incredibly dramatic. Before the war, a barrel of oil was trading below $70. Just 1 week into the conflict, it nearly doubled to $139. The shock to the global market was just unprecedented, and you felt it everywhere, from the gas pump to the grocery store. The cost was just staggering. In the first month of the war alone, the estimated economic damage to Arab countries was $194 billion. And that's not just some number on paper. That's a direct, painful hit to their national economies.
So after 40 days of intense fighting that just battered the region and the world economy, the big combat operations paused. But you shouldn't confuse this with peace. It was the start of a really tense, unpredictable new reality.
A temporary ceasefire gets called on April 8th. The shooting stops, sure, but none of the big issues were solved. It felt less like the end of a war and more like a tactical pause, with both sides just digging in. And out of this ceasefire, Tehran comes up with this incredibly bold and provocative new policy. Iran says, okay, we'll reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But there's a catch. They're going to charge a toll for safe passage. And get this, they demanded the toll be paid only in Chinese yuan. This was a calculated move. It wasn't just about money. It was a direct challenge to the US dollar's dominance in the oil trade for decades.
So this all created a really dangerous new status quo. The war is
on pause. Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, is now the supreme leader. Iran is effectively controlling the world's most critical oil choke point, and, in response, the U.S. has set up a naval blockade, creating this incredibly tense standoff on the high seas.
And that is where it leaves us, a fragile truce, a completely new power dynamic in the Persian Gulf, and a global economy that's basically holding its breath. The heavy fighting might be over for now, but this conflict is nowhere near resolved, leaving the entire world asking the most important question of all: what happens next?